I'm a big fan of Ghosts and Goblins, especially Ghouls and Ghosts on the Genesis. Easily one of my all-time favorite games. So to have this series get their own, at the time, next-gen game, to attempt to replicate such a legendary series in this new third dimension. Yeah, safe to say I was pretty damn excited to find out how the spiritual successor would get this done. We've seen how great things can turn out with stuff like Shinobi and Ninja Gaiden. So, let's check this out. This is Combat Overview. Here, we go over the general controls, main mechanics, what we use them on, and then seeing how it all comes together. We have ourselves a sword and shield, and unlike the 2D predecessors, we don't get an assortment of different options like daggers, crossbows, torches, or an axe. But the game makes perfect use of what we have. We have a quick horizontal attack, and a more powerful but slower vertical attack. You cannot chain between the two for different enders, but with the help of the thumbstick, we can get two more moves like the spin and thrust attack. We also have this low crouch attack that has its moments, but this downward ground pound attack that's usable out of a double jump is extremely good, but also risky. It lets us attack those flattened enemies like no other, even has this crowd control shockwave to clear any nearby enemies on landing, but you'll be stuck in end lag for a good bit, so be sure not to spam this. So our kit is pretty streamlined, not very complicated at all. But again, it's not about how much we have, it's all about how the game pushes us to use those tools to their fullest. Onto defenses. Of course, the shield is the forefront of our defensive game. So you'll lock in place once you guard, only protects your front, but it can stop melee and projectile attacks. Can even be used as a boomerang. So it's also a projectile to help poke from afar. Just keep in mind with every hit it lands as it's tossed out, and with every attack you block, it'll lower your shield's durability, which is shown by this blue meter underneath our health. But yeah, it'll break eventually. And once it does, well, need to rely on spacing and a whole lot of enemy knowledge, because knowing where and how they attack is what we need to plan out our approach. There's also no iframe move to avoid these attacks either, so it's all about spacing and positioning. Timing as well, that's very important too. Looking at the HUD, these green segments aren't exactly our health, they're actually our armor's durability. And if you're familiar with G&G, a single hit would be enough to wipe an entire layer of armor. Not here though. Sometimes it might as well, but we have some extra leeway with 2 or 3 extra hits before we lose an entire piece. Now to collect more armor, just explore. Going down an alternate path will reward you with another layer, and yep, if you jump in certain spots, it'll reveal a hidden chest. So be sure to hop around when you can. Just watch out for mimics. But if you don't lose any layers and happen to pick up another armor piece while maxed out, we'll be given this golden armor just like previous games. But here we'll be given constant iframes for a brief time. Yeah, all in all, I think it's a pretty neat change how each tier has their own health bar pretty much. Lets us get away with one more hit, which goes a long way. Now this doesn't mean you want to face tank everything and just hold forward with no thought. Because if or when you die, losing all your lives, death will pay you a visit. Now in order to continue, you need to give up a death coin, which lets you start from the beginning of the stage with some extra lives to use. Thing is, can't rely on this forever, because with each visit, death will only raise the prices for next time, and then more again, going from 1 death coin, then 2, 3, and so on. So it gets more expensive the more you continue, and this cost will persist for the rest of your run going forward, making it pretty rough to learn the later stages. Now if you can't pay the price, then it's your life that death will take instead, sending you back to the main menu, where you have to load your last save, which you better hope wasn't too far back. So it has this sort of exponential cost against you for those many repeat mistakes. Now I do like this idea, think this mechanic would work just fine if the game was like 1 or 2 hours long, so being consistent for the short amount of time is not too unreasonable, pretty manageable honestly, think of running guns or beat 'em ups. But when you have to carry that luggage of mistakes for this 5 to 8 hour playthrough, possibly even longer, yeah, that's a bit much. Because of that, I would go as far as to say if you die once, just quit and do it again until you get it done in one life. It sort of works around the ever-growing punishment as you learn the game for the first time. Plus continuing with death coins will just put you at the start of the stage anyways. So there's no real difference honestly, one just avoids an even larger headache later down the line. So yeah, early on, just always reset since starting out these are very easy as is and should be done with no issue. Luckily the stages are very short, so the experience and foresight gained along the way from stage layouts enemy placements, where to find pickups, and so on are valuable info the game can't take away from you, luckily. So you'll fly through these with ease after some practice. It's kinda like Shinobi in that way, since these were no longer than 3 minutes on average to complete. Wasn't bad, honestly. But yeah, doing this should give you as much leeway as possible for the late game, that's for sure. And only then did I give myself one extra retry for the last half of the game. For upgrades, there's no shops or skill trees, but as you go through the stage clearing these hordes, defeated enemies at random will drop these abilities or enhancements. Could be an additional light attack, blades on your ground pound, can toss your shield like a boomerang, maybe add a tornado on that shield, can add a few elemental buff for extra damage, which by the way, each attack you land will take a bit of its meter, shown by this bar around this center icon. But yeah, some other abilities to shoot a fireball, or ice to freeze enemies in place for an easy follow-up, and so much more. So as the game goes on, you'll collect more and more of these to power up Maximo. You can just hold on to these as long as you can too. But these aren't permanent. Well, some aren't, because when you die, you'll lose a good handful of them. Now I say some because if you go to the select menu, you can actually rearrange your pickups, and this will let you prioritize or lock down which to keep upon death. Anything within this bracket are safe, basically. So depending on your playstyle, we can keep what we like for some sort of custom move list. We do get more slots to lock down even more abilities though. So once we defeat a major boss and save the captured sorceress, she'll instantly give us an additional slot to permanently pin down one more power up. Hey, not bad. Now we can hold on to even more stuff. But that's not all, because she'll give us 3 options: armor, free save, or kiss. Choosing the armor will give us a full set, so we'll go into the next stage with max health or durability, right? Now I say free save because you're actually paywalled from saving your game. Before we get into that, I do think this is a solid option most times, because after this boss fight, we'll be tossed right into the next major world and into its first stage, skipping over the hub area, which means we won't have a chance to save for a good bit. So you better not die or lose too many resources, because resetting will send you back before you defeated the boss, maybe even further back. Okay, I don't really mind this idea of having to spend money each and every time I want to save. I think it has players interact with the game way more often otherwise. Because think about it, if you really wanted to, you can just beeline ignore a handful of things. But since we need money to save our progress, buy upgrades, or even health refills, now we have some real incentive to actually fight enemies, do some exploring, and possibly risk it all by going through those more trickier obstacles for bigger rewards. So the money aspect has us engage with the enemy and level design at all times. It's a very well thought out system because of that. But man, once we add the death penalties on top of that, that's a bit much. To me, the stages are perfectly balanced, where they're challenging but fair. So I do want to master them, but when I'm constantly having to reset the game to avoid this snowball effect from getting even worse, yeah, it just gets in the way of enjoying this game's expertly crafted difficulty curve. I think this game would have benefited from using something closer to Shadow Soldier. The game is pretty challenging, but the player is given infinite retries to keep at it. But if we over rely on these, we'll barely get ourselves a passing rank by the end. And if we have too many stages with low grades and not enough A or S ranks, then we're locked out of the true final stages. So in theory, if retries weren't so over penalized here at Maximo, it'll encourage us to actually replay stages to find our best route and form new strategies. Once we put all those pieces together, then we can keep going back to put it to the test and raise our mastery percentage with every stage. It would just promote replayability by a good bit. But with what we have right now, the death coin system just punished any sort of experimentation. If it is removed though, then there's room for us to do some theory crafting practice runs. Oh, and then we could have had this higher percentage work towards unlocking some true ending or even an extra boss fight too, right? Which lines up with what GNG did with their second loops. Yeah, a lot of what ifs, but in my head, this seems like it would have worked. Okay, went a little tangent there, but our last option is the kiss. Now the kiss won't do anything for us, has no benefits with some sort of passive of any kind. But since it instantly uses up the newly acquired slot to lock in extra ability, it kinda leads to this challenge run, because keeping these prevents us from getting too many pins. So we lose out on some potential upgrades, that can really make those later stages easier, but that's the idea. It's meant to restrict our power-ups to keep us at the base level. Pretty interesting dynamic that lets us customize our difficulty a bit. See, I would have really liked to try this out even more, but with a death coin system, it just kills us for me. Now, if you can manage to keep all those kisses till the end of the game, you unlock gallery mode. It's fine. Didn't do this myself, because personally, this isn't really a worthwhile reward, especially nowadays, when we can just look these up online with ease. So this reward doesn't do much for me. It would have been really cool to have a secret weapon though, like the Bishamon sword in Onimusha, or something like the magic sword from Medieval. That would have been way more enticing to push myself even further than just some very cool but pretty useless unlockable pictures. When it comes to enemies, they'll start things off pretty simple with basic skeletons. They have a one-track mind, and that's just to rush you down. If there's a crowd of them, it's best to rely on those quick horizontal swipes to manage the crowd. And just like the classics, these guys will spawn right in front of you or even behind. So be sure to stay on top of these spawns and not get too overwhelmed. Later they'll get some weapons of their own. If they have an axe, they'll fling it like a boomerang. It even flies back. So to avoid these, just jump over it, sidestep, or block to move in soon after. Now they do combine them with the levels, and yeah, we got some classic instant kill setups if you're not careful. Speaking of projectiles, there's one that tosses bombs. If you stay far away, you'll go boom. If you try to hit him up close, you'll go boom. Either way, both will do massive damage, just wiping out an entire layer of armor in one go. So instead, just ignore them and run on by. They don't do much up close if you just ignore them, other than a very stubby kick. So it's easy to avoid them once their one bomb is out waiting to detonate. Some with halberds, these guys just march in their own little area. So once in their bubble, don't use light attacks, because it'll just bounce off. Instead, use that forward poke. That's my go-to. You can even block their 2-hit combo and punish them right after. Some even have their own shortened shield. As a classic trope has taught us over the years, you do not want to mash around these guys. That's because attacking them as they're guarding will have you bounce off, leaving yourself wide open. So it's all about being patient. Just hold that shield up and wait for them to attack first. After blocking their one swipe, then it's our turn to land our guaranteed counterattack. Also, you can forward poke them as they're running up, and that's because they won't go into that defensive stance until they're really close up. So with the right timing and spacing, can deal solid damage early on. There's a pirate. You never want to guard these guys because their multi-hit combo shreds your shield. So, let's get behind. Well, there's two reasons why we want to do that. It'll save our shield for one, but it also lets us set up a safer kill on them. Because if you notice, these guys have a blade just sticking out of their chest. So if you try to ground pound as they're facing up, yeah, you'll trade. So to avoid this, we want to send them flying face down instead, which has a harmless handle side facing up. Now it's a lot safer for us. Honestly, doing this really reminded me of fighting blades in DMC 1. There's also crows that steal your money. You hear them before they swoop towards you, so be ready to swat them down. Money is pretty important, so these guys can be scary. We also fight this goat demon. These will rev up a charge before rushing you down in a straight line. Once I see that dust around their hooves disappear, that's my cue to jump over them. There's also pigs. First thing you'll notice, they're kinda short, and using a regular horizontal swipes will just clink, bouncing right off their hammer. So instead, we need to crouch. Now we're on the level to swipe away at them. Just don't get too careless because their hammer creates this massive shockwave. So be ready to jump over it. And if you played Kingdom Hearts 2 on critical mode, then I'm sure you'll understand how dangerous these guys can be. In the last few levels, we see Black Knights. These guys are bodyguards. So there's moments where you can run past certain enemies and go about finishing level. But with these guys, nah, that's not happening. Because as long as he's still standing, a purple barrier will keep us out. So we want to take him down before we can move on. Best thing to do is double jump and do repeat ground pounds. This will easily stagger and even multi-hits since they don't get sent flying. Keep tossing this out until it's just the floating helmet left. From here, jump once and swipe away with a light attack. I can usually squeeze in 2 of these before returning back to the ground pounds. There's some more, but these enemies are pretty fun to fight, and we only get more of them with each major area. Now I can imagine they might seem very simple, but think of it like this. Your loadout from moves or power-ups are always different. So depending on what you have in the moment, you have to rethink your entire approach every time you see these same handful of enemies. Not to mention how they combine all these multiple different enemy types, right? Which makes us think about who to prioritize. But yeah, should I guard their attacks to punish afterwards? Do I even have a shield to hunker down? Or will doing that give me overrun by standing still for too long? Should I run to create some space? Maybe my sword is buffed with magic powers to shoot out ice or fireballs from a safe distance. Maybe I can toss my shield too, right, if I have that ability. Thing is though, do I even have the room or chance to safely run away to throw these things out in the first place? So the ever-changing level design adds another layer to that on-the-fly decision making, and this happens constantly too. Then add the heavy consequences of dying, which all culminates to making some high-stakes gameplay, because every attack and every jump we make must be done with complete confidence. And with all these unique enemies and varied level designs, both with their own gimmicks, from collapsing fours to slippery slopes, and tossing all sorts of crazy hazards for good measure, yeah, it leads to some intense, methodical decision making, just like G&G. For bosses, we're starting with Ghastly Gus. He'll fling dirt at you, sidestep and keep moving until he slams the ground, which sends out this shockwave for you to jump over. Just keep closing the gap the best you can while avoiding these attacks. Once close enough, toss that shield to trip him up a bit. Now that he's busy hopping around, just go up and add one last ground pound. Then hit him with a forward poke. Poke the boss, just hang back as far as you can to jump back and forth to avoid those shots. He also summons little minions to shuffle towards you, so it's all about running away and take as little hits as possible. Once he goes through his full rotation of attacks, eventually he'll split off. Now it's our chance to deal damage. So chase down these little replicas and swat them away until you've cleared them all out. Captain Cadaver. For this boss, you just want to stay on the left side of the screen, or his right side. And that's because his only attack is with the anchor, which is used by his opposite arm. So we'll be able to avoid it with ease just by being on the other side of him. And once he swings, there's enough end lag for us to hit him. So line up your shot to have him stumble into a vent, getting his peg leg jammed. Now that he's struggling to escape, you can land a low sweep to deal some actual damage. Stay pretty close afterwards to bait an option soon after, and repeat the process. For Glitter Scum, I just run along this solid middle part. As you run on this, the main attack of his we want to look out for is the spit. Now he'll send them far enough in whatever direction you are running at the time, so you'll catch up to these if you keep holding that same direction. But as long as you mix in some zigzags, you'll avoid them. After that fifth spit, he follows up with this fire breath attack. This lingers long enough for us to make our way behind him to attack his only weak spot. Just be careful of the butt slam of his afterwards, setting out this shockwave for us to jump over. Achille. At the start of the fight, just run in circles around him. Once you see him move, jump to avoid both of his magic attacks. Now the one we want is this purple wave. Once dodged, then it's our chance to move in for an attack. We only have time to land one hit, so use that forward poke. But be quick to run away because he'll do this burst attack to clear the nearby area. Yeah, just keep this up until we force him into this brief second form. So while he's this giant trying to stomp us, these generators are slowly healing him. Can't believe I'm about to make this comparison, but it's similar to Death Adder in Golden Axe Beast Rider. So just like that fight, we want to destroy each and every one of these. You want to have some clean lines though, because if you're too slow, the generators will turn back on. Once he's knocked out of this form, it's back to the usual stuff. After destroying these generators a second time, he'll change his staff into an actual weapon. So for the final phase, he only does this very noticeable 3-hit combo that's extremely easy to avoid, and it has a lot of end lag, which means you can move in to punish with a forward poke. After that, just steer clear and go back in again once his combo ends. You can think of this as fighting Credo. It's not too different really. And for the final boss, this fight will take place in complete darkness. Well, mostly. We get brief moments where the lightning from outside will give us a quick glimpse of this monster. It helps us keep track of it in some way. So just stand still and wait. Eventually it'll close in on us, but the lightning will expose it long enough for us to jump and attack that jewel on their head. Gotta be quick though. Yeah, it can show up from any direction at any moment. Gets into some jump scare territory at times. And afterwards, they'll disappear. You can even catch them staring you down with their yellow eyes, so use that to your advantage. Also, if you back yourself into a corner, this will limit their options, making it a lot easier to react when they do finally reveal themselves. And that's Maximo Goes to Glory. It perfectly captures that spirit of not just G&G, but the 2D action genre as well. having this perfect blend between combat and platforming. Always like how the further we go back with these 3D action games, the more faithful they were to those origins. Can only see this sort of design within the first few years, where they still knew and understood that they were this continuation of the classic 2D action platformer. Feel like I should wait on this a bit longer, though just can't help but want to put it right next to Shinobi. Because just like that game, it did a flawless job of translating our 2D action games into this brand new 3D space. Not only that, but for being such an early pioneer of all this, he has great controls, solid enemy lineup, and varied level design that leads to some very deliberate plays. That's both nerve-wracking and damn exhilarating to pull off, just like G&G. Yeah, no matter where you look, it's pretty apparent that they truly knew what the G&G series is about and why it works on all fronts. And it's such a nice touch to see the stages sort of recreated as if it were a 2D G&G game during the end credits too. Yeah, there's just a lot of love and care for this game and the entire Ghosts and Goblins series from start to finish. So if you're a fan of G&G or even the classics, then please don't pass this up. It does the name justice in more ways than one. Who could have known? This damn near perfect game is kind of a must play.